We have with us Dr. J.S. Guleria, Namaskar,
Namaskar.
and Dr. Randeep Guleria, who is the Director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi. Both of them represent a legacy in medicine. Dr. J.S. Guleria joined AIIMS in 1958 and contributed to the development of various medicine departments and a number of other institutional issues in AIIMS. He's been awarded the best teacher by AIIMS also, and he's the BC Roy Award winning professor. Dr. Randeep Guleria and Dr. J.S. Guleria are both Padma Shris. Both of them have headed departments in AIIMS in the past, and Dr. Guleria went on to become director, and Dr. J.S. Guleria was dean in AIIMS. So a number of similarities between the two. We will start with Dr. Randeep Guleria because he's at the forefront of the COVID fight in India. So the first question would be, 8 months into the COVID outbreak, the government has announced a virtual unlock of most of the activities through Unlock 5, and cases continue to rise. So what is your concern going forward from here?
So if you look at the current situation, the number of cases are still rising. We haven't reached a situation where we could say things have plateaued and the number of cases are coming down. But at the same time, it's important for the economy to start working. There is a huge strain on our economy and for people's livelihood, and therefore balancing the two becomes a huge issue. And because of that, it's important that individuals understand their responsibility, because it becomes more important now than when we had the lockdown. When we had the lockdown, because of the restrictions that were imposed, it was easy to have what we call non-pharmacological measures, and we were able to prevent the spread of infection. But now, as the lockdown has sort of opened up, it becomes even more important that people understand their responsibility in terms of physical distancing, wearing a mask, hand washing. If we are able to do that along with the lockdown opening up, then only will we be able to quickly bring the virus under control and bring down the pandemic. That is the biggest challenge that we have right now, because in many ways there is what we call a COVID fatigue among our population, and they are now fed up of sitting at home, not being able to interact socially, not being able to go to restaurants, not being able to go to a movie hall. That is causing a problem as far as they are concerned, and therefore we need to make them understand that we are still in the thick of the pandemic, and it's important to follow all these measures, because these measures are actually like a vaccine that we have today, and if we do that, the cases will come down. As we've seen in many parts of the world, in Taiwan, in Vietnam, in South Korea, cases have come down to a very low number because of these measures. So we have to really reinforce on these.
Right, sir. So we are also headed into the winter season, and respiratory viruses to people as the winters approach. And what is your concern as a professional?
So there are multiple concerns that I have. One is we don't know how the virus will behave during the winter months. Many viruses become more the infectious, or the virus spreads much more because of the temperature and the fact that the virus can survive for a long time. We're also heading into the festive season where people will also tend to crowd, and that is another concern. Thirdly, other viral infections like influenza also tend to become much more common during the winter months. We know in India we have a spurt of influenza infection, and therefore the combination of another viral infection along with COVID will increase the strain on the health system, and the health burden will become much more. The third concern that I have is regarding pollution. During the winter months, we also see a rise in air pollution because of crop burning in various states like Punjab, Haryana, also because of increasing vehicular traffics, and because of the weather. We have what is known as an inversion. Because of the cold temperature, pollutants stay at ground level and they don't rise, and therefore ground level pollutants become much more during winter than they are during summer, because hot air lifts up the pollutants. So the combination of increasing air pollution, more other viral infections, and COVID-19, all three of them will actually cause increased burden as far as respiratory diseases are concerned.
So all the more reason that people should be cautious, as
Correct,
you said.
correct.
Okay. The third thing would be, sir, you've been asked many questions about whether India has hit the peak, but it is quite clear that cases are still rising, so we haven't yet seen a peak. Is that a fear during the festive season, sir?
It is a cause of concern because the cases may increase, and in my mind, India, like we have seen, let's say in the US, different areas will peak at different points in time. There are certain areas where the cases have started coming down, and we have probably hit the peak there, and if we are able to maintain that, we will probably have a downward trend. But there are certain smaller towns, even rural part of India, where the cases are still increasing, and they will peak at a much later time. For the country as a whole to really say that we have peaked and the cases are coming down, it will take some time, and I hope that we are able to weather the storm as far as the festive season is concerned.
So you are saying that there may not be a national peak, sir?
What I want to say is that the national peak is something which is relative. There will be regional peaks, and then as when we sort of combine all the data, we could say that there is a national peak.
Okay, but you are warning people about the festive season.
Correct. I think that is a
might
major
Okay.
case of concern.
So what is the burden of asymptomatic infections in India? Do we know anything about it?
So the data is not there. The sero surveillance will give us a better idea, but it varies from anywhere between 40 to 60% of patients may be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. Even if you look at the data, it suggests the number of patients may have had mild symptoms which they did not think were related to COVID, or were asymptomatic and never got themselves tested, but they already had antibodies. So there is a large number of people who are infectious, can spread the disease to others, but either are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms which they feel are not COVID related, and therefore don't take the precautions of quarantine, isolation, and that is why the infection continues to spread.
But sir, what is the way out of this asymptomatic burden? Because many people are not reporting infections.
So the way out is that we continue to presume that everyone can be infective, and therefore the precautions that I said, everyone wears a mask, even if you are symptomatic, asymptomatic. Everyone does physical distancing. Everyone washes the hands. These are not for people who are symptomatic. It is for everyone. If everyone does this, then it doesn't matter whether you are asymptomatic, symptomatic, because all of you will take precautions and break the chain of spread of the infection. That is what we need to do.
Okay. Sir, is COVID-19 airborne?
So there are, when we talk of airborne infection, we are looking at the particle size. Particles more than 5 microns are those which are droplets, and they don't go very far. They tend to drop quickly onto the surfaces, and that is why we say maintain a distance of 2 meters, wash your hands so that you don't, when you touch surfaces, because that is the main form of transmission. But yes, there can to some extent be what we call aerosol transmission of particles less than 5 microns in size, and that is important in an indoor environment, because in an indoor environment these small particles may stay in the air for a longer period of time. They may travel further, and people may get the infection if there is a crowd inside and there is no good cross ventilation. So again, the message is that in an indoor environment, have good cross ventilation, make sure that there is good ventilation in offices, in spaces where there are a large number of people, avoid crowding indoors, and avoid recirculation of air. If you have a air conditioning which is common, make sure that a lot of air exchanges happen, so that the air which is inside goes out and fresh air comes in.
So because workplaces are now opening up, sir, under Unlock 5, you would suggest that it is best to have cross ventilation.
Exactly.
And ACs should be avoided as
Now
much
as winter is coming in and we don't need ACs that much, most places they should try and avoid ACs, keep your windows open so that you have a lot of air venting out.
So there's one debate going on around symptoms related to COVID-19. Many people don't actually have the traditional symptoms that you have in the clinical protocol suggested. Are you looking at expansion of the symptom category?
So symptom category is being expanded. When we are talking of symptoms, which are mainly respiratory symptoms and some symptoms in the form of loss of sense of smell, loss of taste, we are realizing that there are a number of patients who present atypically. I have seen patients who presented just with fever and diarrhea, and then they did not think they had COVID, and we then tested them and they turned out to be COVID positive. The family turned out to be COVID positive. We have seen patients, young patients who present with stroke. They just came with sudden weakness of a part of the body, and then the X-ray looked abnormal, testing was done, and they turned out to be COVID positive. So that number is small, it's not a large number. Majority of patients will present with respiratory symptoms, fever, body ache, sore throat, cough, but there will be some who will present in an atypical manner. So we should have a low index of suspicion, and basically if there is anyone who presents where we have a suspicion, we must test. Testing becomes very important in such patients.
But would you then revisit the clinical management protocol for symptoms?
So there is a need to, and we are doing that constantly, of looking at symptoms that one should look at and suspect, and we keep adding things like diarrhea, like I mentioned, loss of taste and loss of sense of smell and other things. So this is an evolving process, because COVID is teaching us every day, and as we learn, we change our treating strategy, our diagnostic strategy, the symptoms that we look for.
Right. So, what is your concern with respect to reinfections? Because few cases have been reported in India and abroad also.
So reinfection usually is now set, it's actually less common in the first 3 months, but as the pandemic progresses, there are certain cases. We have cases from India, we have cases from Hong Kong, from the US, which have been reported, which have reported reinfection. 2 or 3 things are very important. One is, how common is reinfection? Currently it seems it may not be that common, because if you look at large number of cases, then the number of people who have been diagnosed to have reinfection is relatively small, but this may change with time. Second is, does reinfection lead to milder disease or severe disease? We don't have the answer to that. Some patients actually, when they get reinfected, because of the immunity that they already have, develop a milder infection. But there have been reports of some people developing a more severe infection, and it is felt that it could be what we call the antibodies in your body because of previous infection may lead to a more enhanced response, stronger inflammatory response. This has been reported in dengue also, that when you get reinfected with dengue, which is also a viral infection, sometimes you can have a more severe form of dengue. So we need to see, and we need to do research as to what are the parameters which predispose an individual to reinfection and to a severer form of reinfection. It will also have some implications on vaccine. How does the vaccine behave as far as reinfection is concerned, and does it give us total protection or does it give us partial protection?
So, we are looking at reinfections. Are we studying these patients, sir?
So there is a whole groups which have started looking at reinfection, looking at how the virus has changed. So looking at reinfection from the virus point of view, is there a mutation? Looking at reinfection from patient's point of view, and how they behave when they get reinfection.
Okay. And what about residual disease? Because many people are getting residual disease also.
So what we call long COVID or post-COVID sequelae is something that we are seeing, and this is something that is now being reported more and more. If you start looking at literature, it suggests that even after you have recovered, almost 80% will have some problem of post-COVID. Majority of them have fatigue, body aches, not feeling well, not able to concentrate, dry irritating cough which goes on, and this usually resolves in 6 to 8 weeks. But there are some who develop permanent damage. They develop lung fibrosis, there is scarring of the lung, and because of scarring of the lung they get more and more breathless. There are some who have strokes, like I mentioned. Some have cardiac damage and they get breathless on minimal activities. We have discharged some patients on oxygen therapy, they have to take oxygen at home. So COVID does lead to some sequelae which can be permanent, but in majority of patients, the sequelae that it causes are mild, and people usually tend to recover within 2 months.
What is your advice to people who have recovered from COVID?
So what people who have recovered from COVID, 2 or 3 things I would like to say. One is, like I said, if you recovered from COVID, that doesn't mean you're immune from COVID. You must take all precautions in terms of wearing a mask, hand washing, physical distancing. Even if you recovered from COVID, it doesn't give you what we used to call as an immunity passport, because that is what the data suggests. Secondly, you should take a good healthy diet, do some regular exercise, build your exercise gradually. The best thing in our country is do yoga, do breathing exercises, do yoga, start walking and building up your immunity, and take good green leafy vegetables, fresh fruit, a healthy diet, and gradually you will recover and become all right.
So, should we be very hopeful about the COVID vaccine? Because efficacy of respiratory virus vaccines has been low, 50% we are told.
So vaccine is a big challenge. People tell me that there are certain viruses from which we have not been able to get a vaccine even for 30-40 years. HIV is one example. So we need to see how effective is the vaccine. Also, for respiratory infections, vaccines usually tend to provide less protection, and as the virus changes, you need to really sort of change the vaccine on a regular basis. But one of the ways that we can really get over the pandemic is to develop a vaccine, and technology has changed so much. We have now large vaccine platforms. We are looking at RNA vaccines, DNA vaccines, we're looking at inactivated vaccines, we're looking at VLP viral like proteins, we're looking at nanoparticles. So technology has changed so much that there is hope that this time we may be able to get a vaccine which will be more effective and really be help us in bringing the pandemic under control. So I'm hopeful that research will really bring us a vaccine. The issue is how early can we get a safe and effective vaccine. That is something which is a big challenge because any vaccine which comes has to be safe. We cannot take a chance. And then the second issue is how effective is it in the high risk group, in the elderly, in people who have comorbidities. So all of those questions need to be answered, and we need to answer them in a proper manner rather than in a hurry. And that is why I think we should not have any shortcuts, but I am sure that the vaccine will come at some point in time.
We survive because of hope.
Yes, sir.
It is the hope because we survive. Time we become healthy,
Yes,
so it is the hope which makes us survive.
Yes, so that's a beautiful thing to say. Sir, would you like to put a timeline to vaccine development?
So I think we should have a vaccine by early next year, but the challenge is once we have a vaccine, the next big challenge is how do we market it, how do we produce so many doses, how do we produce so many syringes, so many needles, so many vials, how do we train people, and how do we have an efficient cold chain so that vaccine reaches every part of the country, and then how do we prioritize it, who gets the vaccine first, who gets it later, in a proper manner so that there's equity, there is no sort of, it's done in a transparent manner, and then everyone gets the vaccine. There's already work going on in the government in this, but I think those are challenges also that we need to address.
Okay. And sir, what kind of efficacy are you expecting from the COVID vaccine, because you are also involved in development, ICMR?
So I would suggest any efficacy which is over 50 to 60% would be acceptable, because that will at least give us some decrease as far as the number of cases is concerned. We are looking at two parts. One is some strategy which will bring us back to a near normal, like we said, social functions, going out to restaurants. And the second part is a strategy which would be vaccine related, which will say now the pandemic is over, COVID is no longer an issue. So the first strategy will be possible even if the vaccine is available with less efficacy and less doses are available. We can vaccinate the high risk group and the individuals who are more prone to infection. We will be able to bring down the number of cases to an acceptable number so that our normal activities can restart. But it will take some time for us to reach the second stage where we say the pandemic is over and now we have got rid of COVID-19.
So are you saying that with vaccine, as you said, prioritization of vaccines, we can actually achieve herd immunity, which we otherwise
So we will
can't?
be able to achieve some sort of herd immunity and some protection so that the number of cases comes down and there is, well, you could say some degree of herd immunity, yes.
So how long do you think such a vaccine would be efficacious with 50 to 60%?
So that is the biggest question, that we don't have an answer for that. That only we will come to know. The hope is that since so many vaccine candidates are being tried, and there is also a possibility that different combinations can be tried, that we may hit upon a vaccine which gives us long lasting efficacy and which is effective, or a combination of vaccines which may actually serve the purpose. So this only time and research will be able to tell us.
So there's some debate on India's numbers with respect to cases and deaths also, because our government data does show that we are the lowest mortality in the world per million cases if we see. And US President 2 days ago only in his debate has said that India, Russia and China are hiding data. You are at the forefront of the fight. How would you respond to that?
So India currently, you can't hide deaths. Deaths are reported, and deaths are reported not only by the hospital but also by the cremation ground or the burial ground. And we are not now in a state that people start burying people in their backyard or burning bodies in the middle of the jungle. Secondly, we are also not in a situation where reporting is not done in a transparent manner. Everything is uploaded. The number of tests that are done, it's mandatory to upload them. It's a transparent system. So I don't think that there is a way that you could hide the number of deaths. You can say that maybe we are looking at it in a different way, but deaths cannot be hidden in our country at all. So the cases that we are reporting, the deaths that we are reporting are actually there for the, I would say, not only the national media but global people to look at and to see that it's transparent. There is no way that you can suddenly say that the deaths are being hidden.
Would we say it's impossible in today's world
It's not
to hide
possible.
data?
It's not possible to hide data. Data is now so transparent. It's there on a platform which is available to the public. So everyone sees how many tests we are doing. We know how many RT-PCR we are doing, how many rapid antigen tests we are doing, which state is doing what test, which state tested less yesterday and have done more today. All that data is there. So that is very transparent. So I don't think there's any issue of hiding data in terms of positivity, in terms of deaths.
So I'll bring you in here.
Oh, thank you.
Sir, why do you think India's mortality is low? You have seen our healthcare since ages, you know.
Well, it's very difficult to say why the mortality is low, but it is low, no doubt, and that is, we are lucky in that way that it is low. This maybe there is some immunity, and the people have pointed out that we have earlier given BCG vaccine to the people. That might have been giving some immunity, and there are others who are taking some drugs, and we don't know.
Yeah.
But it is difficult to pinpoint what exactly. Maybe the virus is also of a low immunity, I mean low sensitivity and things like this.
Okay.
So it is very difficult to say, but at the moment I say we are lucky that it is on the lower side.
Lower side. Sir, one thing I wanted both of you to answer, first Dr. Randeep and then you. We had the strictest lockdown in India, and there's been this debate that despite such a lockdown, why should we be the second highest in terms of cases? How would you explain that, sir?
So I think important thing to remember is our numbers, our population, and 2 or 3 things happened in the lockdown which are not expected. One is because of the extended and strict lockdown, a lot of our laborers and daily wage workers actually started going home because there was a whole issue of will they be able to sustain themselves in the cities that they were staying in. And second is we had a lot of people who did not follow the lockdown as aggressively as should have. Certain groups moved here and there, and people didn't realize the importance of lockdown. I think the lockdown served us more in preparing. We were able to prepare our health infrastructure, our healthcare facilities in a better manner, and that really has paid dividend in the long run. We also reached a stage where we were having the whole issue, like I mentioned, of trying to have our economy going and also trying to lift the lockdown. So we lifted the lockdown at a stage where we did not have a decrease in the number of cases. We had not really flattened the curve or shown a downward trend, but we had to do it because economy and livelihood became an important thing. So I think those are important things to remember, that a country like ours, with the population that it has, our socio-economic status, and the fact that a lot of people works and livelihood was getting affected, the lockdown served its purpose. It was not ideal from the point of view of really bringing down the number of cases and then opening it up, and that's why I've been emphasizing that although the lockdown has been lifted, our responsibility still in terms of COVID appropriate behavior continues, and we have to really re-emphasize that.
Dr. J.S. Guleria, what do you think, sir? We are now witnessing almost 65 lakh cases in the country.
That's right.
Could we do anything differently than what we have done?
No, I don't think you can do differently. I think the people who are advising us, who are at the helm of the affair of doing the thing, they have done a good job.
Yeah.
And the lockdown, of course, it has been criticized by some persons that it should not have been done or badly have been done. But I think the lockdown make the people aware, and they got frightened. At least there is something very big is coming up. So they became aware, and they started following some of the instruction which was given by the authorities. And all of them didn't follow. A few of them who didn't follow, they probably did a bad job. But most of the people started putting on the mask, started washing the hands. And if you go to every shop, you find that sanitizer available everywhere now. You see, things like this which are there. So it did help at that time. The second thing is there, as we all know, at the moment it is the disease which is mostly confined to the urban area. In the cities, we are seeing that luckily the rural areas are not that affected. If the disease had gone to the rural area, we would have been in a very bad situation. And all the migrants which came, they came from the village to the cities. If they had gone back, then probably they would have been in a bad situation. So the lockdown has done a good job, and we became more aware and we started following the thing. And result is there, it has been contained to some degree.
Right, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask you, both of you have spent lifetimes at AIIMS. You are both come from Himachal Pradesh. Can you recollect any memories of your days in undivided Punjab, because you studied in Amritsar?
You see, I first tell you that beyond the 30s, I studied in a school in Himachal. That was the only school which had a boarding hostel at that time.
Which place?
This
sir?
was Indora.
Indora.
Indora,
Hamirpur?
that's my high school, SMS Malaram High School, and this was up to 10th class. It was a hostel there, and most of the people used to come who used to want to the hostel. So it was a hostel there. It was in a jungle. Actually, in the night time, we used to see sometimes leopards coming and other thing into the hostel. And we have a one well for the bathroom, which was situated about 3 kilometers away from the hostel.
The bathroom, sir?
The bathroom was in the jungle.
In the jungle.
And the well for taking our baths, we used to go 3 kilometers early morning, about 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, go to that well and fetch out the water and then wash.
So this was in Hamirpur?
This was in Kangra district.
Kangra district.
Tehsil Noorpur.
Noorpur.
At that time, Tehsil Noorpur. Now the Indora has also become Tehsil.
Tehsil.
No,
In Himachal.
That was in Noorpur. And we had a very rigid situation. Our breakfast used to be only 2 chapatis, which were made of the wheat and chana. And those were given to everybody in the morning. You can apply some ghee over it to take it, otherwise you have to take without that. This was a continuous process. I remember from 5th class to 10th, this is what we ate every day.
Okay.
And lunch time, we only have a dal which is called Ganga Jamni. That was throughout the year, that was the only dal morning and evening.
Ganga Jamni.
Ganga Jamni, which is black and chana mix, which is there. So it was a very rigid life. Evening we used to have a prayer meeting, which was there. And I actually sometimes, now I'm getting on to 90 to 93, that what we used to say that every prevention should bring start at the childhood, or as soon as you are born, the prevention should start. Probably that walking every morning 4 kilometers, 3 kilometers, not talking much of ghee, talking this has helped to probably survive.
Yes.
So that was the only school from where we got it done. And I wanted to become an agriculturist, truly speaking. So after I passed the matriculate from that school, I went to Lailpur for joining the agriculture college in Lailpur. At that time, now it is in Pakistan. So I appeared for the interview, everything happened. But at that time, there was in the British time, only one person to be taken from Jalandhar division.
Okay.
So the other person was taken, I was not taken.
Okay.
Probably at that time it was the recommendation which all mattered. So then we got rejected and I came back, and then while coming back in Lahore, we stayed with one of our relatives as to what to do. So thought came, somebody met me, a doctor, he said, I'm a doctor. I said, I should also become a doctor. So I said, okay, I will take the medical course. I joined the DAV college Lahore and joined the medical, and I was doing quite well. And then in the partition, I remember we used to in the night give the little bit of go to one house to another to save them, to revive them. The people were migrating from one place to another. And ultimately, I came back from Lahore and in a very difficult situation in a train and reached home. Actually, my parents thought probably I had been killed and dead.
Really?
So I reached 2 days afterward with the train stopping in between. So from Lahore to Pathankot it takes quite a bit of time. Otherwise it takes 3 hours.
So you don't know about your parents, what happened to them?
No, they were there only.
No, parents okay. They lived
Himachal.
in Kangra.
Achha.
They are still in the same place which they are. So that was the situation. Then for partition took place, and I remember how the people were murdered from one place to another, how they came, and that is our memory now. So for 8 to 9 months, there was no college. I was absolutely sitting at home in the village and doing some helping in the farming and other things. So I thought, let me now start something, and I said I might do the dairy farm. So I was planning to open a dairy. But my mother told me, look here, beta, if you do the dairy farm, you will spend all your life in this gobar. You better do and study again. So I thought this is a proper advice. So then I went and joined the DAV College London. In those days, preference was given those who have migrated from the law. So then I passed that, luckily good marks came. I studied quite hard, sitting in a room, a hostel again. So then I got admitted to the medical college, Amritsar. I was sort of quite close to the professors by working hard. I mean, it is purely hard. I have no recommendation or anything of that sort. So then I got into the MD. In those days, MD was not by competition as we have these days. In those days, it was whom the professor can choose is a good boy. So I got into MD and cleared in a minimum time of 4 years with cardiology as a special subject. Then I joined the provincial, I appeared into the Punjab Civil Service Board, and I was selected as a PCMS, Punjab Civil Medical Service, gazetted 1. So that job I joined in January, February 1958. At that time, I read in the newspaper some advertisement was published in the paper about the All India Institute of Medical Sciences coming up. They wanted the registrar to come. So I said I better take a plunge in a new place rather than in the PCMS. I was posted in Amritsar Medical College as a PCMS. So I didn't know how to go about it because only 4 months, 5 months back, earlier we have joined the PCMS. So I talked to the medical superintendent. He said, let me see the rules. He was kind to me. He found out, he said, okay, if you can give 3 months salary, then you can go. He said, okay, I will also write to the higher authority what this is. So I gave them 3 months salary. Everybody around advised me, you should not go, it is a pensionable job, gazetted civil surgeon, everything. So why are you making a foolish? I said, sir, no, my mind says I must go to a new place and see this. So I came and appeared in the interview here. So I was selected. At that time, the job was not pensionable. So that was one point when I left the Punjab, that everybody was saying you are leaving a pensionable job and going to a where is there no pension, like. So I joined and I asked the institute, is it a job, is a teaching job? He said, yes. So I said, I will join because my interest was teaching. Okay. I was teaching the students right when I was a postgraduate in the Amritsar Medical College. So that interest has continued even now. So after that we joined here. When I joined, there was only, if you see those 2 blocks, there was no building. Yeah. It was all grass. So many times I thought, where I have been caught. We asked for the house, they said all is vacant, choose whatever you want. So I selected one on the first floor, so that is more safer because everything is lying vacant. And we had no hospital. We were given 1 ward for medical, 1 ward surgery in Safdarjung Hospital. Okay. So we used to go and teach the students in Safdarjung, where the first batch of students had come in AIMS. That was in 1958, 57, 58. So I used to go to Safdarjung along with my senior, and the faculty was very small. There was only 6 people in the Department of Medicine and Specialty. Now even in medicine there are about 30 people. So in those days there were only one professor. Actually was Dr. Wig, who became a director again later on. He was principal of Medical College Amritsar. He has left earlier and has come to the AIMS. And the person who was able to get him to the AIMS was Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. Yes. She brought him here, which is there. So we many times thought what to do. So we used to go Safdarjung. Actually, Safdarjung and AIMS, they were always quarreling with each other. They were never harmonious. We always try that combine Safdarjung with AIMS or AIMS with Safdarjung, make one situation here with a tunnel underneath. They never agreed. Okay. Because the Safdarjung people, there were 3 people, I remember, Iyer and Dr. Rao and Dr. Duraswamy. They were very powerful. They were very close to Pandit Nehru. Whenever this Rajkumari Amrit Kaur brought up the question of amalgamation or 2, that undergraduate may remain in Safdarjung and be postgraduate and specialty in AIMS with the tunnel underneath, which is, they never allowed it to happen. Their demand was there, all of them should be made head of the Department of Medicine, Surgery, Orthopedic, then they will come, which the Rajkumari Amrit Kaur and the selection board never agreed. So we continued with those type of situations. When in between they started saying, you better get out of Safdarjung. So what to do? Then the nursing hostel which is here, we thought convert this into a hospital.
Okay.
Then that nursing hospital was converted into a hospital, and the upper floor was left for the nurses.
Okay.
So I remember I admitted the first patient on 31st December 1959 by the name of Mr. Khema. We took from Safdarjung and admitted in AIM because somebody who was with us at that time, the two people were taken for doing post-graduation. One was Dr. Sama, he died recently, he has a nursing home here, and other was from Madras, best student of that. So it was a patient for his study and patient of liver disease and so on. But we started the outpatient, the clinics, cardiology, medicine and chest in the nursing hostel. And the other building which you are seeing was not there, and they were all cricket ground which we used to play there.
Okay.
And the students were small, we knew each other, they used to come to the house and meet and everything which was there. And this continued. And I remember when we opened up the laboratory cardiology, we had no peon given to us at that time. And we used to, I'm using the word we because I don't think one alone I can do anything. It was a combination of number of people, myself, Dr. Bhatia, Dr. Roy, who were there. And we used to keep the floor ourselves because there were no peon at that time.
Oh my God.
And we were the only one to discuss among ourselves and do the job. And that time when we started the cardiology and the chest diseases and the chest clinic, we used to have referral, that the patient used to be referred by the physicians or by somebody, and we used to write back to everyone as to what has happened to them, what is going on. That was the small number in which we have, and our most of the time was being spent on making the equipment list, which equipment we got for which department, because other department was not there. So then suddenly, as you know, there is a pluck there. The New Zealand gave £1 million to the AIIMS for making a building.
Okay.
So that £1 million, actually, if you go to New Zealand, they still say that every one of their population is 1 million. So everybody has continued £1.
That is there out there. There is a plaque out there. You can take a photo of
Where
that.
is that?
As you enter our auditorium side,
Huh.
जो हमारा foyer है, उसमें लगा हुआ है.
This was in which year, sir?
This was in
1
the
million pound?
57, 58,
उसमें लगा हुआ लिखा हुआ है.
negotiation
If you
took
go there
place
and
and got
see.
money. Then the question was there, some money was given USAID. And then we also got some equipment which came to the Rockefeller Foundation. And the Rockefeller Foundation also gave the scholarship some people to go and study in USA and others. I also got that scholarship, Rockefeller Foundation Fellow. And with the family they paid, and we went to Canada. He was a small kid at that time, and we spent 1 year in Canada, and that was because we were working here, and so do. So that was the situation when the hospital started. And gradually, once those buildings came up, then we opened up the hospital and we started working there.
New courses were also started. DM was also started then.
Then when we started the cardiology and other thing department, and then the first thing we started, because this something has to be done in the AIM, then we said why not another degree. So they started the degree in the cardiology department. Our professor was very keen, and we were two only actually faculty members, assistant professor, myself and Dr. Bhatia, who became the now head of the cardiology in AIM. So both of us then were asked, please join DM course. We said we are already faculty member, assistant professor, why you want us to do this? They said, no, you have to join the DM. So then they got all our paper together, and then they said, okay, we will admit you will not appear in theory, you will only appear in the practical. So we appeared in the practical, and our two examiners who were there, one was Dr. Rustam Jan Vakil, who was a famous cardiologist from Bombay, and Dr. Bettlingam, she was from the Vellore. So they were the examiners. After the finishing the course, they went to the director, they said, you want to give the degree of DSc, Doctor of Science. He said, but this degree doesn't involve any research investigation, this is a clinical degree. So they say, what else to give? Then they came around and said, okay, we will give DM. So this was the DM which was started in the AIIMS for the first time in this country. And then this DM and then gone into every subject, cardiology, gastroenterology, respiratory, that become a common, whether they have the infrastructure or not, but then the DM became as usual. So we started that, and then I must say that the institute which was laid down that they must do excellent work in research, patient care, and in teaching. And I have no hesitation in saying that they, all the three, have been fulfilled very well. The institute, in the turn of teaching, lot of innovation was done. We started the seminars in which the people, junior to senior, used to take part. And you have to present to the students in presence of all the other seniors which was present there, and that made good teachers. I remember the first lecture in one of our juniors were asked to teach. Actually, she started weeping, she couldn't speak. Then the head of the institution said, please don't worry, you are learning, go ahead, speak. So that is how the training was given. Similarly, we put more stress not to get the written lecture the teacher used to bring it on. You give the slides and the projections, and that was the main situation which was done. Then also we started assessment that the 25 to 30% will be day-to-day work of the student, assessment will be done, and that is followed by all other institutions now. Similarly, the anatomy and physiology in other colleges used to be 1.5 years. We make it 1 year, so that why you spend the other time in the clinical medicine. And this preventive and social medicine department we also turned into community medicine, and this became, so there were a lot of innovation, and of course the research work was going side by side and the other things were there. So at that time the population was small and the institute was also small, I should say, and we could see everyone individually and everyone could be advised.
Sir, tell me something, you know, AIIMS took a long time to be established and all of you put in a lot of hard work to build the institution. Today, what is so special about AIIMS that we are announcing AIIMS-like institutions in every state? Is it easy to set up AIIMS? Because, you know, we sometimes wonder...
See, I might tell you, I was asked to in one of the, as a guest person in AIMS. So I was speaking, I told them very frankly, the government had done a biggest mistake or a biggest disservice to this institute by calling all India Institute of Medical Sciences. Because All India Institute of Medical Sciences is under the Parliament. Other you are starting it, All India Institute, you are making them under the sort of a society and things like this, although they are independent. You are breaking down the reputation of the All India Institute. All other All India Institute can never come up like this institute. You cannot put in that much money, you cannot put that much manpower, you cannot open up that many specialties. They should have called those institutes Indian Institute of Medical Sciences or Institute, whatever name you want to give. Now, as I tell you an example, I have somebody who came to see me where I work now. So I said, he said, sir, I am from the AIMS. I said, well, you are from the AIMS, which year? I said, I have not seen you. He said, sir, I am not from AIMS Delhi, I am from AIMS Jodhpur.
Okay.
So, things like this, you see, when you talk of AIMS, you are bring down the reputation, you are bring down the work which the AIMS was doing, for which you were All India. I remember once when we had a meeting in the AIMS, the people from PGI Chandigarh has come. They were all the meeting, they were also there. Dr. Santokh Singh, Dr. P. Anchutani, I think you are known in Chandigarh, they are well known. So they were my teachers also in Amritsar. So they came, they in the open market said, why are you calling this All India Institute? What is All India about this? So we are calling our postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, call it a medical institute. Why All India? This is not the only one. So this gives a different look when we call it All India. So you are right, by calling it that way, by opening that, the institute can never come up like this. And actually, by getting, then the people will say, what is All India Institute? Nothing is doing there, and they are equating with this. So this has been a mistake, I said that, but the All India Institute now it is so unwieldy. I think that something has to be done. We have been trying right from the beginning, make it a reference institute. There where you can refer the person and we can even. It has never happened. The government said no, you have the poor people have to be opened up, and that of course make me remember. I will tell you later on when the Pandit Nehru said. So this has continued, but I should say the institute has fulfilled what was laid down in this write down that the institute should attain this. Those are fulfilled with all the deficiencies. It has gone ahead.
Randeep ji, how has your father influenced you? Because you were born in Dharamshala, you also came in AIIMS and contributed everything you could. How much of what you are is because of your father?
So whatever I am today is because of my father. It's not only influenced me in life, but also in my career. And also I've seen his hard work, I've seen his practice, the ethics, and his clinical way of seeing patients. All of that has actually made me a better person, a better doctor. And I don't think I would have been what I am today had it not been his support and the way he has evolved. And learning from him has been the biggest experience in my life.
Can you recall your beginnings in Himachal? Anything you can remember about Himachal? Do you go back there? How have things changed on the health infrastructure front?
So I have been going to Himachal regularly, both to my grandparents' place, both to our village in Manjra and to Dharamshala. Dharamshala I remember a lot because I grew up there. We used to go there regularly. My grandmother used to be there and my mother used to go regularly. Both places like McLeodganj, Kunalpatri, walking all up and down there. The place has become so different. I remember McLeodganj being a nice quiet place. We used to go there regularly for picnics. Now it's become a very crowded tourist spot with so much of traffic jam. It used to be totally empty. We had a place there known as Bhaksunath, which used to have a lot of slates and a waterfall, and it used to be a nice quiet place. Same is true for a lot of places from Dharamsala. You can go to a place called Yol, you can go down to the Kangra Valley. These were very nice times that we had. In my village where my father is from, we had to cross a chakki, which was the khad out there. And I remember going once and crossing it. We couldn't go to our village, there was no road up to it. So we used to cross it after getting off at a place called Dhamtal. And then we used to walk there, and overnight, because of the rain, the whole chakki was full of water, and you were stuck at the other end, you could not come back. So those are the type of experience for a large number of years in our childhood. There was no electricity in our village, and we used to just go there and use lamps. And I remember we used to sleep on the roof, and there we used to have a lot of jugnus. So it used to be a very nice time sleeping in the night there, because you could see such a lot of these bright jugnus all over the place.
Which village, sir, again?
The village name is Manjra. It is closer to Pathankot, and you can now there is a road from behind, but initially there was no road and you had to cross.
It's in Kangra district.
It's in Kangra district. It is in
it's a border with Punjab.
Border.
The last actually the Pathankot
airport
military cantonment is in Himachal. You see that people don't know the airport also in Pathankot is in Himachal. So it is the last area between the Punjab which is there.
Right.
And now of course the village with the electricity there, tap water is there, the Shauchalayas have been opened up which is there. And now you can go to Pathankot, you can take a rickshaw, it will take to our village. So there have been a lot of
things have changed, and so has the healthcare. What I have noticed is that Himachal has done quite well as far as healthcare is concerned. We started off with a lot of challenges in healthcare facilities, but outsourcing the ambulances, no ambulances available all over the city. Ambulance services actually from Himachal can go all the way up to PGI Chandigarh, so as a referral center PGI is there. Also in terms of making sure of basic primary care, I think in one of the states which has done well in the north is Himachal. I've seen that over the last decades. I was also a member of the Himachal Health Commission, which the government had formed about 5, 6 to 7 years ago. And we really saw the transformation in terms of primary health care, referrals, immunization programs, the TB program. So I think there is a lot of improvement, and now we had one medical college, then we had the medical college in Tanda, now there is an AIIMS also coming up in Bilaspur. A lot of new private colleges have come up. In Solan we have one, and new institutions are coming up. Now medical colleges have also increased. In Hamirpur there is one, Nahan there is one. So a lot of impetus as far as producing doctors, providing healthcare facilities. So that way the state has done well.
Right. How would you describe your father as a medical professional?
So I would say my father is a very astute clinician. People say that he has a sixth sense, that he's able to diagnose problems which no one else can. And I think that is because of his exhaustive and extensive clinical experience that he has. Even now he continues to read. When about 10 years ago he suddenly became net savvy. Now he's doing shopping through the net. He would buy all things through Amazon, read articles, downloading them, which I think is something which is a learning experience, that you keep on learning no matter what be your age, and as new things come in you have to adopt them and use them. I think this is what I've learned from him, that for learning and for patient care there is no age. Even now he goes to his clinics and I'm having a tough time stopping him because of COVID, and I don't want him to get exposed, but he will on the sly still continue to see patients.
You go to OPD, sir?
I go to OPD and we run in Sitaram Bhartiya Hospital.
So how would you describe your son as a medical professional?
So, Madeline, let me tell you, I have 3 children. Dr. Sandeep, Dr. Sandeep, and my daughter, she's in USA. As far as
she's also, all 3 are doctors.
She's in USA. Now, don't think that because I'm the father, I'm saying that.
Yes.
I am really proud of all the other 3. As far as he is concerned, Dr. Sandeep is concerned, he is an excellent clinician, excellent teacher, excellent patient care, whatever reports I get it there. Above all, he is a human being, perfect human being. He is humble, and as you know, as a director, as a professor in AIIMS, you have to see a lot of VIPs. He not only sees a VIP, any poor patient which is sent to him, he has never refused. So I say he has not run after the money. Lot of college, lot of private hospital, Medanta was after him, other was after him, please come and join. But he said that it be in a respectful way. So I admired that he sort of like to have a respect rather than, so there are all qualities which are there, so I am so proud of that. The second son is Dr. Sandeep Guleria. He was also professor of surgery in the AIMS. He passed from the AIMS, and then he has now taken voluntary retirement after 20 years service, and he is a consultant in Apollo Hospital. I am proud of him. He is a well-known kidney transplant, and he did the transplant of Jet Li Sahab also. And he is well known because he performed the first pancreas transplant in this country, and for this he is there. And he is doing excellent job there. My daughter is in USA. She is working in Duke University in the eye department, and they are doing a good job as a group for the macular degeneration which is there. So I am very proud of them, and he has become a director. Director the job, you see, when I was there, as a dean, we were 3 selected for the directorship job. Myself, Dr. Bhargava and Dr. B.N. Tandon. And the minister told me, sir, we have taken the decision, you will be selected tomorrow.
Okay.
But next day we found that it was Dr. Bhargava.
Okay.
Well, I didn't have any garage because this was a political appointment. So I said how she got into this. They said there used to be one lady called Pupul Jakkar. Pupul Jakkar. She was very close to Mrs. Gandhi. So they said they have caught hold of that lady, and she has gone to the Prime Minister and asked her to be out of the 3. So he said, sorry. I said, fine, this is the situation. So then she said, Doctor Sahab, I can't work, you have to become a dean. I said, well, I am nothing, I am junior. There are another 3 people senior to me who go by seniority. She said, no. I said, then you talk to them. She talked to the minister, this and that. Then they wrote down there that the dean will be selected not by seniority but also by suitability.
Okay.
So then I was selected the dean. I said, okay, I don't have any grudge, I will work with you. And we harmoniously worked for 3 years after I retired. And the institute had a good time at that time.
So tell me something. You come from an age of medicine where medicine profession was a mission. You said you used to clean floors also, you set up the institute, you gave your sweat and blood to AIIMS. But today, the medical profession is being looked at as a corporate entity. A lot of unkind elements have entered the profession.
Hello.
It has become a profession rather than a mission. What do you have to say
थोड़ी
about
देर में
that?
करूँ.
You see, when we joined, we had one mission. We have to make this institute one day. That was the main thing, because we have started from like a brick, so we have to make the building. What you are saying now, certainly, as you said, the things have become different. Now the people saying that so many, we are not, when we remember we had a car, we applied for the car, government quota, it took 14 years to get a car.
For you.
For you, me, from the government quota. That was the time when we got the Fiat car. It took 14 years to wait for the car to come, because that was the only one which made. Nowadays you see somebody say, oh, that doctor is going into the Mercedes, that doctor is going to the 1 crore, that going to this crore. That lure has made more monetary based doctors.
Yes.
So
what is
then
your
they are not
advice?
even following the ethics.
Yeah.
You see, so unethical situation has come up, and that is the circumstances which has made like
But
this.
what is your message to the professionals today?
No, we give them the message every day. Today, for example, when the patient comes, we tell them the patient comes not only for treatment, he comes to learn also.
Yeah.
See, you have to realize every patient who comes, he wants to know, sir, what have I got? What are I going to do? What is the medicine? Why this medicine being given? What is the side effect of this medicine? How long I have to take?
Yeah.
You have to have that patient to explain to the patient. If you don't have that, and you say, okay, many patients come, sir, oh, here written this, go, take. He said, sir, I am asking you, should I take this? You are not a doctor. I have written there just. So the things are, we tell them, the juniors who come, please have this situation. Some do follow, some follow different situations. And there are so many colleges that opened up, and everybody has a different type of ethics which are there. They see their senior what they are doing. So
So
things
can you
are.
comment on Pandit Nehru, because you used to visit him? And
Pandit Nehru, when this was the times, that was in 50, I think 54, 56, 54, 55. He was attending the Bhubaneswar annual session of the Congress. There in the night he developed paralysis. He developed the paralysis of his left side. So we were flown from here, 3 or 4. I was the junior assistant professor, then Dr. Vig and Dr. Agrawal, we all went there.
So that was maybe after 54, but 60s में होगा.
64. So my duty at that time was to look after him in everywhere. The others are only to say, "Check kar dijiye, then we will go back." So I have to stay back. So Pandit Nehru there, of course, he was little bit, I did, my own impression was that he was very rigid in his views. And sometimes he would like to do in the night when we say he couldn't turn his side, he won't say help. We have to just do it, because he will not say, I'm sick, so I'm doing. Then I remember this was some incident, don't forget, we were to bring him back in a plane. So plane we laid down the gadda for him to sleep, and I must say it was my foolishness, I also had not learned those things. Somebody gave a guldasta of flowers. So I put that guldasta of flower on the bed. So Pandit Nehru saw that flower, although he was paralyzed and I am coming in, so he said, what is this nonsense? Very different. So then I learned, why did he say, somebody said this is done when somebody dies,
yeah.
not when somebody is alive. So Pandit Nehru said, remove this word. Whatever he could speak, but that was the situation. I said, oh, I am very sorry, sir. So we removed it. Similarly, when we came, we stayed in the Teen Murti. That was the place, Pandit Nehru. I must say the family was very nice to the doctors, and we used to be called all together on the breakfast. We used to lift him there. In between, there was a meeting of the parliamentary committee, the MPs of the Congress, and that took place in Murti Mark in their lawn. So Pandit Nehru said, I want to go and see that. So I shouldered him and took him, and we stood in the entrance of the park. People passing, and say goodbye. Then I remember that he said, Kanongo was the minister, Kanongo why. So it was a long time. So I said, sir, you just go back. He shouldered me. He said, you don't know the power of masses. So I have to stay. So I then realized what he is saying is about the political situation, that the power of masses then is the most important thing, which I sort of, that's what he's saying, and he took him back. 26 January, I also shouldered him and took him back, all those things. Then in one incident, he was there, he got into depression. So he went to sleep, and Lord Mountbatten the appointment was given to come and see him. We told him, sir, Lord Mountbatten is coming to see you. He was not the Director General, he had retired at that time. He came from UKIL. So suddenly, my Panditji had gone to sleep, and Mountbatten has arrived. So everybody was, as usual, like Englishman, what to do with him. I said, we asked him, we have to wait till the Panditji get up. So Mountbatten has to wait. It took about half an hour, then we gradually shook him, he got up. Then he came and talked to him, and Pandit Nehru never talked anything. He was depressed. There were some other qualities, of course, he's there. I know the night, I took him to the bathroom and came back, put him to sleep, and the bedside light, I put it off. He said, dog, come here. I went, how will you go back when you put off the light? You will fall, put on the light, I will put it off. So something was there done with exercise.
So how
but
long were you with him?
Well, once he got the paralysis, he died. On the day of died, I suddenly realized that Panditji had died. We rushed to the place. Then somebody was putting oxygen. I said, "Bhai, do something." I cut down his veins and put in the drip and other things. But he was dead by that time, actually. This was more of a show business.
And then later you were also the first doctor on call when Indira Gandhiji's body.
No, Indira Gandhi came. I suddenly asked me, sir, Indira Gandhi has come down. I rushed down, and Indira Gandhi was accompanied by Mr. Dhawan, Mr. Gandhi, and Sonia Gandhi, and there was one more, Fatedar. Fatedar was crying, ha ha, died hot in the casualty. And Sonia Gandhi got his usual wheezing asthma, that she put in the other down. And I saw Mr. Gandhi, and he was dead actually. So I got the scene and got the ECG done, everything was flat. So what to do? So I talked to the health minister, Shankaranand was the health minister. Sir, what do you want to do? Should we declare? I think that is the good thing I did. I asked him, I didn't went out and said, she is dead. He said, Dr. Sahab, hold on, I will tell you in 5 minutes. He went out, I think he talked to Zal Singh or somebody and came back. He said, we don't have to declare her dead. Hold on. Rajiv Gandhi is not here, he is out of Delhi. He is coming back, he was informed. I think he will be here by 5 o'clock. Then only we have to declare. I said, okay, then we talked among ourselves. We shifted her to the operation theatre and put on the blood and things like this, that we are doing our best, and she survived. And then at 5 o'clock, Rajiv Gandhi came and saw her. He came out, he said, Doc, thank you very much. He said, then we declared her. So that was the story when Mrs. Gandhi there, but Mrs. Gandhi was getting her examination done every year. And I used to be one member of that party, myself, Dr. Hingorani as a gynecologist, and Dr. Bhatia. We used to go every year and examine her. Okay. And I remember the day this happened, the Blue Star, the second day she sent for us for the medical examination. So I examined her and I quietly said, Madam, you seem to be relaxed, very relaxed. He said, Doctor, what do you think? Should I be crying? So that was Mrs. Gandhi, which is there. So when Pandit Nehru was sick, of course, he sent us some present also. When he died, she sent the vehicle, car sent it there, you are our family member, you have to come to the cremation ground on a car. So in that way, they were very good to the doctors, I must say that. They respected the doctor, they were very good to the doctor. One day, actually, I was going, my wife, and we were going in a rickshaw. It used to be a Patpata going to the Chandni Chowk, and those days were there, and this all was empty roads. There was hardly anything there. So we were going up, Mr. Gandhi car was coming, and he saw the rickshaw and he started waving up. So those were the days when we have those type of situations, and the things have changed since then.
Dr. Guleria, you remember anything interesting about Mr. Vajpayee, because you were his doctor also, former Prime Minister Vajpayee?
Mr. Vajpayee was a thorough gentleman and again had a lot of respect for doctors. He would always make sure that there was something available for us when we traveled with him in terms of our care, and very often he would also invite us to join him for his breakfast because he was having it alone. He was a person who had a very good sense of humor and would and a great orator, that I must say. So he was a thorough gentleman.
May I,
Yeah,
1 minute
please.
you have got?
Yes, yes.
See, the Vajpayee Sahab was a simple man at that time. When he was the MP only, he used to come to the emergency. So one day came when I got from my office out, I found the Vajpayee Sahab sitting on a bench outside.
In AIMS.
In AIMS, this is there. I used to come in AIMS. He used to come to show
Used
to
to come
Dr.
regularly
Huja.
to-
Huja was his personal physician at that time, and the MP was used to come. So I said, sir, why are you sitting here? Come and sit in my office. I brought him into my office and sat there. Afterward, what happened was there when Jayaprakash ji was sick and was admitted in Chandigarh PGI, and there were a lot of rumors, poison, this and that. So I was sent from here by the health minister, at that time was Dr. Karan Singh, to go and examine him and see. I went and saw him and just wrote down whatever was possible, that everything is being done. He looks a little bit depressed and all those things. And in the meantime, the Congress changed, Janta government came, and they put an inquiry. This fellow from Bangalore, Alwa was the inquiry officer, Dr. Alwa. I was with the WHO. I was in was working in Bangladesh. They took a special permission from the WHO, from New York, from the Geneva, and sent for me. I came and appeared before Alwa in that committee for Jayaprakash Nayak. So he asked me a lot of questions. She said, you said he looked depressed. Why did not you write down that please call a psychiatrist to see him? I said so. Then Chitani was looking after him, then he is a good physician. It was not that psychiatric patient that psychiatric was needed. No, you should know. He was a national hero and you have to sit on. And many questions like this, it went on for 1 hour and 5 pages were written. Most of them against us, and Chitani against it. Chitani had gone to Nepal for some meeting. You didn't write on that he was not there. Why did he go to Nepal when such an important man was admitted? Anyway, he charge sheeted us, Chitani, myself, and other. So this went out to the Janta Dal cabinet on the action, what action should be taken. Actually, an action person, the Vajpayee Sahab, our external minister in that situation, the Vajpayee Sahab said, I know this man, Dr. Guleria, I don't think he can do all those things. So I was exonerated. So Chitani was left in there. So Chitani Sahab was very upset there, I don't know what. But in the meantime, Janta Dal fell. So the government chali gayi, so फिर सब बच गए. This is this.
चलो
Sir,
ठीक है.
just 1 or 2 questions to wrap up. एक चीज़ सर जो आपसे पूछनी थी, technology has become very important in COVID times and teleconsultations have increased. E-Sanjeevani keeps telling us. How do you feel, Dr. J.S. Guleria, because you come from a generation of doctors where personal contact with the patient is very important and now the world is going digital. Will that change?
You asked me, I am very frankly speaking, I see some patient and they rang me up. Doctor Sahab, give me your the account number, I can pay there and then you tell me what to do. I said, you please ask me free. I don't believe in this telecommunication. I would like to see my patient, ask you questions, see your face, how the things are, then I will advise you.
So sir, can technology ever replace a manual?
No, I don't think they can.
physical-
That's, contact human to human is very important.
Okay.
This cannot replace. It might help you.
Okay.
You can follow up your patient, but at least first 1 or 2 visits the patient has to come.
What do you say, sir?
So I do agree. I think medicine is all about being able to look at and understand the patient. There are certain subtle things when a patient talks to you. It's like in between the lines, which is what you pick up.
Yeah.
And sometimes patients don't express things, but you have to be able to understand the suffering that the patient is having. Teleconsultation can supplement things and it can help because of COVID in terms of patient care and preventing spread of infection. But it cannot totally replace the patient doctor interaction and the physical contacts that you have with your patient. You can do it at a distance, but examining a patient, being able to talk to the patient, being able to empathize with the patient, being able to understand how the patient is feeling and what he is going through is also equally important. Medicine is both a science and an art, and the art of medicine is linked to seeing patients, and that is very, very important.
That's a beautiful thing, sir. Just one last message from
Last
you.
I might say,
Yes, please, sir.
it's very rare.
Ah,
I'm not saying whatever the value it is, whatever the government recognized, we are the only family where, and Sandeep, all the three become Padma Shri.
yes, yes, of course.
All three of us are
You-
Padma Shri.
And I believe your
And my father-in-law also.
Father-in-law also. He's
All
a
of-
hockey player.
He is an Olympic gold medalist.
You are a legendary family, sir. It's
No,
a
no, I'm
pleasure.
just saying, so
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the
yeah.
value is there, but the
Yeah.
government did recognize somewhat there.
Yes, yes. So
Although
just
it is a-
one-
it is a
so what
political-
is your message also to people? Because COVID, we still
No,
have
COVID,
to fight COVID.
my message there, you just should strictly follow what the expert have said.
Okay.
Please wear the mask unless until you are sure that there is nobody around, another thing there, or you are alone in the car, you can take it, or the mask must be worn. Number two, must try to keep a distance as far as possible. Washing your hands, sanitizing the things which are there. And as far as possible, if you are suspicious, I know some patient, like, a fellow came to me and I asked him, he sat down there in my house. I was sitting here. I said, what's the problem? He said, sir, I'm shown to a doctor. He is not able to diagnose. I have fever for the last 10 days.
Yeah.
I said, I won't see you. You first go and get the COVID test done. So he went and rang up in the evening, sir, my COVID is positive. I said, it's okay, but luckily I didn't examine him. But still, I talked to him. He said, anyway, I will get your COVID test done after 5 days. It was negative. But then that's the main situation where you find, as you asked very nicely, what are the symptoms? No symptom, any vague symptom, whether cough, fever, or dyspnea, short of breath, and other thing. I asked them, please get first COVID test done, then come to us.
Okay.
So all those precautions, if you are followed, these are the three pillars of the situation, then at least the COVID spread will come down.
Right.
Although it will take its own time, it will come down, and luckily mortality is at like 1.5 to 2%. You won't die of it, but if you follow it, you will come down. Now the world is looking after, see what happened. The president of USA and his wife are positive.
Yeah.
One has to see what happens. His election is also after 30
Yes,
days.
yes, it's a big
And
challenge.
How the situation is a big challenge. And the two debates which he has to appear,
Yeah.
I think they will be postponed.
So going forward, what is the government strategy going to be on the vaccine front? Because an important task force has been constituted and we learned that some prioritization of finances and population groups has been done. If you can tell us something about that.
So like I mentioned, we are working at multiple fronts. The government is looking at multiple issues. One is getting the vaccine and looking at an Indian vaccine. So Bharat Biotech, Zydus Cadila, all are working on this in terms of getting an Indian vaccine, and then working on not only make in India, but be able to distribute it. India currently manufactures 60% of the global vaccines, and therefore we have a huge capacity. But for a vaccine of this type and the population that we need to cover, we will have to upscale that capacity to a large extent, and we are working on that, manufacturing not only vaccine but the support with the vaccine, the syringes, the needles, the cold chain, and also how do we develop a mechanism of selecting, prioritizing, and being able to give the vaccine. If 2 doses are required, how do we give 2 doses? So that has to be done simultaneously, so that the day the vaccine is available, all of this is also in place.
And sir, among the top front runners, for example, we've heard of the Russian vaccine also has been under trial now in India, Oxford vaccine, and the Indian indigenous vaccines. Can we hope for Indian vaccines to actually come before others?
Yes, yes, why not? All of them are neck to neck. So I think if you look at the Indian vaccine, the Bharat Biotech vaccine, or the Serum Institute, which is also in phase 3, all of them are neck to neck. What we have to see is that they have to be safe, and that is the biggest thing. Safety is more important than anything else, and after that we have to see that their efficacy, and if they meet both of these, then they should be rolled out as early as possible.
Madam, I
Thank you
may
so
say
much.
one
Yes, sir,
thing.
please.
See, as you asked him, he didn't start his career from the AIMS.
He started.
He was the
In
assistant
PGI.
professor in PGI Chandigarh,
Correct.
from where he did
First
DM.
jobs.
Yes,
First job
he
was
was
in
first in the
PGI.
PGI Chandigarh. After he appeared here, he got selected. He asked me, should I stay in Chandigarh? That is my only contribution. Graduate course. And then my advice will be an old quoting, near the source of power. Chandigarh is 500 kilometers away from Delhi. You come under the health ministry and you will be here 20 kilometers from Delhi.
So,
So
can I
he
ask,
agreed
it's
for
a-
that.
It's a very childish.
He was very
question.
popular there in
Yeah.
PGI Chandigarh. He didn't want to
So
leave.
you were in
I was in pulmonary medicine. I was working as assistant professor. I spent a long time
This
from.
was which year?
So I was in PGI from 1984 to 1992. I was joined as assistant professor in 91. I worked for 1 year there as assistant professor. I would have probably got a job. My wife would also have got a job. We were actually planning to settle down in Chandigarh.
But you.
Then I appeared for this job, which was more of
Which job was this?
assistant professor in medicine, which I was not sure I would get it because of the fact that I actually came, to be very honest, to give that interview, but also to meet my parents.
Okay, okay.
So it was like, let me appear
He
for
was
this.
there as professor at that time?
My father,
87 में
my father had retired.
Acha, yes.
I am
He was
retired.
already retired. He was not there, so I just came to meet him. He was already retired. He retired in 87. I'm talking of 92.
Yeah.
So I had just come to meet the family at home and also give the interview. But then destiny is like that.
You got selected.
I got selected.
Same department, right?
In
Which your
medicine,
father-
No,
correct.
I was in medicine. No,
So I got selected
That
in
is also a
medicine.
story.
Huh.
We had both worked. I worked in medicine, also in cardiology. Just I was working overtime. Actually, for the beginning, these are personal things. My wife didn't come for 2 years. She was in Dharamsala, was teaching there. And I was working so much that I said, you better stay till I finish this place. So then the job came up, one in cardiology, and myself and Dr. Bhatia were there, and they said, who will join? We were both working in cardiology department also. So I said, there is no quarrel. He has joined you earlier, 2 weeks earlier than me. He will stay with you. I will do general medicine. I like that. I actually told him also, to be a good chest physician, you must do general medicine. To be a good cardiologist, you must do general medicine. So he followed that, and I think as a result of which, he is excellent in chest diseases and he is excellent in medicine also.
Right.
So that is another problem what you said. Nowadays, people who have got DM, I know the cardiologist, DM and chest, there is some fluid. They don't know that this is what has happened. So I asked them
Because
to
they
test
don't
man
know
to come and to
They-
see him.
they become
And the
more
biggest
super
problem is there
specialized.
in the private hospital, they go, the advice is seen from the renal specialist, advice followed. Chest man was called, advice followed. Skin fellow was called, advice followed. Everyone is charged. And what advice is given, nobody writes. What are you for? So all these things are happened which is upset
So
the-
what he's saying is that general medicine is basically the
That is
sole
your foundation.
foundation.
So even if you are, see, the human body is one. You cannot divide it into different organs.
Yeah.
And if you even have, let's say, a heart problem or a lung problem, it can also be a manifestation of a systemic problem. And if you don't look at the individual as a person, as having multiple other system involvement, you will not only miss your diagnosis, you will sometimes probably cause more harm than good.
Okay.
And I've seen so many examples of this. So I think it is very important that your foundation of internal medicine and clinical medicine be strong before you go into super specialization.
Why to go for now? Look at corona.
Corona.
Nowadays, everybody say it is not the chest, it is the people who got brain problem. They come to me, the other
Systemic
fellow comes,
Systemic
he,
issues.
he come with diarrhea, the
It's a
diarrhea is
systemic
my
disease,
problem.
same thing.
So everybody
It's
is,
not a respiratory disease.
It is predominantly a respiratory disease, but like most diseases, it will have a spillover. So COVID also causes hypercoagulable states, increased clotting. The clot can go in anywhere in the body. It causes, the virus can get attached to other parts, like it can cause diarrhea, it can cause loss of sense of smell, taste, it
So
can lead
has
to
the
stroke.
virus mutated in India?
Not much. There has been very minimal mutation, which is of not significance.
So which is a good news for vaccine development.
Yes, yes. The current news is that the vaccine, the virus has not changed significantly for vaccine to have a negative, vaccine not to be effective.
And 8 months is a good time for a virus.
Yes, so this is a virus which is, what the data suggests is unlike influenza virus, which mutates and has this what we call antigenic drift, this virus does not change that rapidly. It continues to be relatively stable and unlikely that it will change very dramatically in the coming months.
So that's a happy news.
That's a good news.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you
Nice
so much.
talking to you.